Hello! Today we will be presenting our paper about cross-lingual slot and intent detection for digital assistants. On this slide we see an example sentence from a popular slot and intent detection dataset. As you can see, the task consists of two subtasks. First we have the intent, indicating the goal of the utterance. Secondly, there are the slots, which identify relevant entities. In this case the slots are Silly Movie 2.0, which is a movie name, and Movie House, which is a location type. For this task, the performance of in-domain in-language models is generally very high. However, in our lab we were wondering about performance for our own mother tongues.
Ciao.
Hallo.
Strong baselines in cross-lingual NLP use machine translation models to translate the training data. So we contacted our colleagues with more expertise in machine translation, whom were also interested in evaluating performance for their mother tongues.
Salam.
مرحبا.
Furthermore, we were also interested in using mass language modeling to adapt to new languages, so we contacted a colleague with more interest in this direction to join this project.
Merhaba.
Finally, we added Chinese and South Tyrolean based on the availability of annotators.
Hola.
We based our annotations on the data from two existing datasets. We took 400 samples from each, created new guidelines, and converged annotation styles. Kappa agreement with the new guidelines on the Dutch data was 92, indicating a near-perfect agreement. This slide shows one sample from our dataset, translated and annotated for all included languages. From this example, you can clearly see the variety in languages, as the slots can be either in the beginning or in the end of the sentence, and they can even swap order cross-lingually. For our experiments, we used MatchAmp, a multitask learning framework for NLP. We use it as a baseline as well as a starting point for our models. A standard matchup model for slot and intent detection would look like this. As input, it takes the words, which are then embedded using contextualized embeddings, and this encoding is shared, while for each task it adds a separate output decoder. For our auxiliary tasks we will add additional decoders on top of this. We compare two different pre-trained embeddings, mbert and XLM15, where the former includes almost all of our languages and the latter includes approximately half of them.
For comparison, we trained the MatchAmp baseline on translated SLU training data from English to the target language with transferred labels. To do that, we use a transformer-based NMT model trained on TED Talks and Open Subtitles, which are close to the SLU domain. We transfer the label of each source token to the highest scoring target token using attention weights.
Now we are going to talk about our cross-lingually trained multitask models. Here we use several auxiliary tasks in the target language to jointly train with slot and intent classification tasks. Our first auxiliary task is mask language modeling. In order to learn target language representation together with the intent and slot classification, we train a model with mask language modeling and our task classification objectives. Mask language modeling objective is optimized on target language unlabeled data. For mask language modeling, we applied the same masking strategy with BERT. Next, to learn from syntactic information of target language, we use universal dependency parsing as a set of auxiliary tasks, namely part of speech tagging, lemmatization, morphological tagging, and dependency parsing. For all these tasks, we train a shared encoder based on multilingual BERT and several task-specific decoders.
We chose neural machine translation as a third auxiliary task to learn to transfer linguistic knowledge from English to the target language jointly with the intent and slot detection task. Based on the shared encoder, we implemented a sequence model with a recurrent neural network LSTM decoder and attention mechanism.
Before we go to our main results, I would like to stress that our models have quite different computational needs, especially NMT transfer is very costly to run. In this graph, we plot the accuracy scores of each model on intent classification. We use either mbert or XLM15 and we average the scores over our 12 target languages, so we exclude English. NMT transfer is clearly the best model, outperforming our baseline by 15 to 30 absolute points in accuracy. The multitask models, in contrast, underperform compared to the baseline. In this graph, we see the span advance scores for each model for the slot identification task. Here we have a quite different picture compared to the previous graph. Mass language modeling proved to be the most robust auxiliary task overall. If the target language was not seen during pre-training, the language model Universal dependencies parsing is also highly beneficial as auxiliary task.
We investigate the performance increase over baseline for each of the proposed auxiliary tasks with respect to the language distance to English. As we can see from this plot, masked language modeling, depicted in pink, is the most promising auxiliary task when using multilingual BERT as encoder. Most importantly, results for languages distant from English show even larger performance gains as shown in the right part of this plot. We conducted a similar analysis using XLM15. Here we can see that for closed languages, both masked language modeling and full universal dependency parsing are beneficial. Also, compared to multilingual BERT representations, exploiting syntax when using XLM15 helps for distant languages too. Regarding slots, we evaluate our models using F1 score variants to understand whether the detection or the classification of the slots is the bottleneck. The metrics we employed are strict F1 score and two relaxed variants. Unlabeled F1 score consider the correctness of the span ignoring the labels, whereas loose F1 score considers partial matches as true positives. We here show the scores averaged over all 12 languages for each model using multilingual BERT and XLM15. The main findings are that neural machine translation transfer does very well on the loose F1 metric, which means that it struggles finding spans, whereas neural machine translation as auxiliary task with the XLM15 makes more labeling errors. For additional details and insights, we refer to the paper.
So now we're taking a closer look at the very low resource dialect, which is South Tyrolean. South Tyrolean is Austro-Bavarian dialect spoken in northern Italy, in this little corner here shown on the map, which borders Austria. A few more details on South Tyrolean. It is also called Südtirolerisch. It's a German vernacular dialect. In fact, it's spoken in this minority, which is in the northernmost Italian province of Bozen-Bolzano. As this is dialect, it has no common orthographic standard, and in addition, it's really from a diglossic environment, highly influenced by Italian and Latin. For instance, here in this example, we see that there is a word that is actually used from the Italian patente, which is used in this example sentence, "Hast du das Patent schon gemacht?" Asking whether someone has already obtained the driver's license. It was particularly challenging to get unlabeled data of this dialect. We managed to get a few examples from online sources like Twitter and Ask.fm, where we again see that it's highly interspersed with other languages, and some Italian, some German, some English even. But we see also that the second source, Ask.fm, is a bit more natural, in a sense also closer to the target of dialogue agents. So we were wondering, okay, we have only gotten up to 30,000 sentences. How good is this? Can we use this in boosting performance in this low resource setup? And the answer is yes. So as the following paragraph shows us, we obtain a zero-shot performance of 49 when using multilingual BERT for this, but using any of the amounts of unlabeled data here helps us to boost performance. Together with all of the data, which is only 30,000 sentences, we can boost performance by up to 58, almost 10%. And what we also see, if we subsample to smaller amounts of data, there is a clear benefit of using data which is even closer to the target domain, showing that Ask.fm is better than using the same amount of Twitter data, but altogether results in the best performance.
We introduced a new multilingual dataset for slot and intent detection. It contains a wide variety of languages as well as topics. In our experiments, we saw that the machine translation baseline is very hard to beat for intent detection, whereas for slot detection, our auxiliary tasks gain much higher performance. Overall, masked language modeling proved to be the most robust auxiliary task, Whereas if your language was not seen during pre-training, universal dependencies perform better and are more efficient to train. Thanks for your attention.